I'm really fascinated by the marketing, and I know I appreciate what you just said about how, uh, you think people just want something to do on a Saturday afternoon. I totally agree with that, and yet even now, like, as things are changing so much, I think in terms of cultural attitudes about certain types of exploited animals, like fur, animal testing, I still hear regularly, "Well, but, they're doing such a great job taking care of the animals here." Can you
Mhm.
talk about, like, different ways that zoos market themselves and how they're deceptive besides what you've already gotten into?
Sure. Yeah. One of the big things for me is the education side of things. We educate particularly young people. There's a lot of kind of co-opting of like class-based argument. So, in a city with in inverted commas and all of the kind of often classist and racial tropes that come with that phrase. And, we're treating inner city kids who don't get to see animals. And these people can't afford to go on safari to Africa. How else will they learn, compassion for animals if they don't see them in person? And it's like, well, how does my toddler daughter, why is she obsessed with dinosaurs? Like, she can't go see a dinosaur in person, but my goodness, if she could be a dinosaur, she would be. Um, and really, oh, hi, puppy. Sorry. Um, a dog just came in.
Yeah, no,
Um,
this is Murray, and he needed to be with me. It was extremely important that he is
sorry.
touching me 100% of the time.
That was super unprofessional for me to interrupt that, but he's gorgeous. Um, so yeah, and zoos are kind of like, well, how do we encourage conservationists, et cetera, et cetera? But pretty much every young person or a huge, huge percentage of young people in the Western world will have been to a zoo at some point in their lives. And yet we haven't seen, just millions of conservationists being born. And the zoos bringing them into that. We're just not seeing what the zoos are claiming kind of play out. There was a really interesting study a couple of years back, which was interestingly commissioned by the zoo industry, and then the data was kind of flipped in the reporting of it. But essentially, what it looked at was, I think, 3,500 young visitors to London Zoo in the UK, and the learning outcomes, and the paper that was published by the zoo industry was like, look at these opportunities we have. But when you looked at the data, it was something like 60 something percent. So the majority of the kids experienced either neutral learning or negative learning. So they came out with understanding that was incorrect, or they didn't learn anything. And in that as well, there was feedback that the children didn't feel that they had the knowledge to contribute to conservation. So it was just one zoo and it was just one sample, but that doesn't surprise me at all. We've been watching people in zoos, during this investigation. We see school groups come through and they are not learning. They're having the time of their lives. They're having a day out from school, but um, I wouldn't call it a learning experience. We looked at the Bronx Zoo. They have gorillas there, and the gorilla exhibit was really, really popular. But people were just moving through it, lots of shouting, lots of screaming, lots of laughing because you could see his butt. Um, but the amount of time, the average amount of time that people spent at the enclosure was 1 minute and 9 seconds. So what are people learning from that? It's not possible to learn in that window of time. So people just don't actually seem that interested, even when they're at the zoo.
Every once in a while, you hear somebody, a defender of zoos, who's a scientist or whatever, who said that their first exposure to animals was at the zoo. It's such an unscientific way to say it. It's just
Right.
like maybe that person would have been fascinated by animals no matter where their first encounter was. Like it's just because someone once when all the kids around him was that really a way to keep animals in prison, a reason to keep animals in prison.
Right.
I probably said this the last time we interviewed you because I say it every time we talk about zoos, and it's a little provocative. But I heard Jim Mason speak many years ago, and he said teaching kids about animals by taking them to the zoo is like teaching them about sex by reading them pornography. Like, you learn a
Mhm.
lot about sex by reading or I shouldn't say reading, I'm living in the past by watching pornography. Um, and you do learn a lot about sex, but you learn all the wrong things. And this reductive, stupid, not useless, but interesting in some ways, but
Yeah.
you don't really is that how we want to live on this planet? Like, just learning the worst aspects of everything and not any of the heart and soul. And I it really struck me, and I think of it every time I think about zoos because I think there's a lot of truth in it.
Mhm.
Um, so I do want to cover, in addition to this, my favorite topic, but I do want to cover the whole story because I'm not that on top of what's going on in the zoo world. When I first got involved in animal activism, I think I was reading more about what was going on with zoos and canned hunts and where the zoos got the animals and how zoos
Mhm.
ended up started out in a good zoo and ended up at a roadside zoo. It's this whole business. Is that still going on? Has Because I know there have been efforts to sort of reform that. And a lot of the issue had to do with they always want babies because babies bring in the
Right.
crowds. And they don't need babies because babies, they live 20 years and they're only babies for a year. So is
Yeah.
all of that kind of scandalous stuff about sourcing still going on?
Um, I think less so now. There have been stricter measures put in place. So, for example, the Big Cat Public Safety Act, which was introduced at the beginning of 2022, that essentially cut off zoos' ability to have cub petting operations for the big cats. They can still have it with kind of smaller cats, which doesn't make a huge amount of sense, but I think a couple of things that was the perfect storm because, of course, there was Tiger King and the absolute chaos that was, but that brought the issue like really to the fore, and people understood just the chaos of it, the cruelty of it. And so the Big Cat Public Safety Act, in theory, ended things like cub petting. Um, there are still interactive opportunities with other animals. One of the things we do know is that there's a specific phrase in zoo stud books. So the zoo stud books are essentially the record of births, deaths, moves, all of this between zoos. And in theory, the stud book is supposed to monitor all the animals who are in a breeding program, and it's to help ensure genetic viability and just to know where all the animals are. And there is a specific phrase, lost to follow up, which is entered into those stud books where the animal essentially disappears and they don't know where the animal went. And I can't give you exact figures, but we find in our species research, we found lost to follow up in big cats, we found lost to follow up in primates, we found lost to follow up in giraffes and cheetah. Um, so some animals are, quote, going missing from the stud book, but we don't have information on where they're going or the reasons behind that. But it's common enough that it is a category in these stud books.
Is there a fear that they're ending up in cantons after many transactions that can't
I
really be
don't know.
followed? Yeah.
I don't know. I know there was a great documentary called The Conservation Game, which was largely focused on the Big Cat Public Safety Act, but that did actually follow some of the animals, and found that some of them were ending up in roadside zoos. But yeah, I'm not sure the extent to which that has been curbed now with that
Yeah.
legislation, and I really don't know on other species what that might look like.